Somewhere, there's a phone. It's been switched off for months now, sitting in a location only one person claims to know. And inside it, according to that same person, is a video of Nancy Guthrie from what may have been the last day of her life. No one outside that individual has seen it. No one has confirmed it's real, and the price to find out is 1 Bitcoin. To understand why anyone would take that claim seriously at all, you have to go back to where this began, to 2 notes that arrived within days of each other and set the entire case in motion. The first reached a Tucson television station on February 2nd, just 1 day after Nancy Guthrie was taken from her own home. It demanded payment in cryptocurrency and laid out a deadline. If the money wasn't paid in time, the demand would increase. If it still wasn't paid, the note made clear there would be consequences for her safety. Whoever wrote it knew exactly what they wanted and exactly how to phrase the threat to get it. That kind of precision doesn't read like panic. It reads like planning, carried out by someone who had thought this through before the first word was ever written. 4 days later, a second note reached that same station, and this one told a very different story. There was no ransom figure this time, no demand of any kind. According to people familiar with what it said, the note stated that Nancy Guthrie had died shortly after she was taken. No apology attached to a payment request, no indication of where she might be found, just a claim, delivered flatly, and then silence that has lasted ever since. Investigators believe both notes came from the same source, and for months, almost no one outside law enforcement knew this second note even existed. It stayed buried entirely from public view until June 22nd. More than 4 months after it was supposedly written, which means for over 4 months, the public was forming opinions about this case without knowing one of its most significant pieces of evidence even existed. While all of that stayed hidden, something else was happening at the exact same time, in a completely separate channel. Around the time the first note surfaced, a media outlet began receiving a different kind of message, not from whoever took her, but from someone claiming to know who they were. Over the following weeks, that person sent more than a dozen messages. They said they weren't involved in taking her. They said they were afraid of what the people responsible might do if they discovered how much this person knew. And they claimed access to something specific, a phone, kept somewhere secure, holding a short video allegedly showing Nancy Guthrie with one of her captors, along with names and addresses tied to the people behind it. For all of that, they wanted 1 Bitcoin. Here's where this gets harder to simply accept. When this person first made that demand, 1 Bitcoin was worth close to $100,000. By the time they were still asking for that exact same amount, months later, its value had fallen substantially, putting that single coin closer to $60,000. The ask itself never moved. The value behind it did. To some, that's just how cryptocurrency behaves over time. To others, it's a detail worth sitting with longer than a passing thought. If this person genuinely possesses what they claim to, why would the price stay frozen instead of adjusting to reflect what 1 Bitcoin is actually worth today? Then there's the one piece of proof they refused to provide. Asked for a single frame from this video, enough to settle the question of whether any of this was real, they said no, citing fear that hidden data inside the image could expose their location. That refusal is where real doubt sets in, because there was another way to handle this safely. An attorney could have brokered the entire exchange anonymously, holding any payment in a trust account until the information had been verified, without this person ever having to reveal their identity to anyone. That option existed from the start. It was never used, and if the stated fear was genuinely about exposure, that's the part of this story that still doesn't add up. And yet, this person hasn't been written off entirely, not by the outlet they kept contacting, and reportedly not by federal investigators either. When the idea of testing this person publicly was raised, investigators reportedly asked that it be paused, saying they believed they were getting closer to identifying who was behind these messages. That's not confirmation this person is telling the truth. But people who investigate fraud for a living don't typically ask you to wait if they're already certain there's nothing worth waiting for. If you've been following this case as closely as we have, you already know how rare a genuine break would be at this point. We're staying on this story as it develops, so if you want to see exactly where it goes next, now is a good time to subscribe. There's one more detail in all of this that's easy to overlook. The point at which this person's tone shifted, from suggesting Nancy Guthrie might still be alive to implying she likely wasn't, lines up closely with when that second note, the one revealing her death, was actually sent to the television station. That note, remember, stayed hidden from the public until June. This person was hinting at the very same thing, privately, months before anyone outside the investigation knew what that note said. That timing doesn't prove a connection between the two, but it's the kind of alignment that becomes harder to dismiss as coincidence the longer you sit with it. Setting these messages aside for a moment, there's a separate question running underneath all of this that remains just as unresolved. What actually happened to Nancy Guthrie? Two competing theories have circulated among the people following this case most closely. The first treats this as a kidnapping that was never meant to end this way. Under this version, whoever took her wanted payment and intended to release her once they had it. Then something changed, possibly the stress of captivity, the fear of being caught, or the fact she had been taken without the medication she needed daily, and her health declined in the days that followed. What came next, under this theory, was panic. The people responsible understood that what they were now facing was far more serious than anything they had planned for, and they went silent rather than risk being traced. The second theory has less to do with what happened during the kidnapping and more to do with why she was chosen in the first place. Her daughter is Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, and that single fact has shaped nearly everything about how this case has played out publicly from day one. This theory holds that Nancy Guthrie wasn't selected at random, but identified specifically because of who her daughter is, a face recognized by millions of people every single morning. What supports this theory is where the notes were actually sent, not to national networks with far greater reach, but to one local Tucson station. That choice suggests whoever did this knew her from the community she had lived in for decades, not simply from a television screen. Neither of these theories has been confirmed. Both remain analysis, built from the limited information that has made its way into public reporting, not conclusions drawn from an active federal investigation. That distinction matters, because a theory, no matter how convincingly it fits the available facts, is still not evidence. What hasn't changed through any of this is what it has cost the people closest to her. Savannah Guthrie has spoken about her mother on the Today Show more than once since February, including through visible tears, telling viewers, "We are in agony," and asking anyone with information to come forward. Nancy was last seen at her Tucson home around 9:30 that night in January, dropped off after dinner at her daughter's. She was reported missing the next morning, when she failed to show up for a church service she had planned to watch. For a family that has now been living inside this uncertainty for months, every new claim, whether it holds up under scrutiny or not, reopens something that was never given the chance to close in the first place. If this case has stayed with you the way it has with a lot of people watching it closely, we want to hear what you think actually happened. Drop your theory below. This is a case where viewers have raised angles genuinely worth considering, and we read what gets written here. So where does that leave things? Nearly 5 months in, there's still no confirmed location for Nancy Guthrie. There's still no public evidence tying any specific person to her disappearance. What exists instead is a pattern of claims, some old, some recently surfaced, none of them resolved. The next real shift in this case will most likely come from one of two places. Investigators finally tracing whoever has been sending these private messages, or new physical evidence surfacing entirely on its own, separate from anyone asking to be paid for it first. If you want to be here the moment that happens, subscribing means you won't have to come back looking for it. We follow cases like this one all the way through, not just while they're trending. The early hours of February 1st are where this case actually begins, and that part of the story has never been laid out in full. Nancy Guthrie's children went to her home that morning after she failed to respond, and what they found made clear something had gone wrong inside a house that, just hours earlier, had been entirely ordinary. A doorbell camera mounted at her front entrance had captured movement overnight, and when investigators investigators pulled that footage, what it showed became the first hard piece of evidence in the entire case. A masked figure can be seen approaching the house in darkness. The figure is wearing gloves, wearing a backpack, and carrying what authorities have described as a firearm. For several seconds, this person makes repeated attempts to disable the camera, tapping at it lightly, trying to knock it loose. When that doesn't work, the figure reaches for a nearby potted plant and uses its foliage to block the lens entirely. It's a small, deliberate action, the kind that suggests someone who came prepared, who understood the camera was there and wanted it gone before going any further. The attempt didn't fully succeed. Investigators were able to recover the footage despite the obstruction, and what they pulled from it became the only visual record of what may have been the first moments of Nancy Guthrie's abduction. Authorities later released a description based on that footage. The individual is estimated at 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, of average build. No identity has ever been attached to that description. Nearly 5 months later, that same figure remains unnamed. Outside the home, investigators found something else: drops of blood on the front porch, later confirmed through testing to be Nancy Guthrie's. It's a detail that, on its own, says little, but combined with the doorbell footage and the fact that nothing inside the home suggested she had simply left on her own, it became one of the clearest indicators investigators had that this was not a disappearance. It was a removal, done quickly, done by someone who came to her door already masked, and done by someone who, to this day, has never been identified, questioned, or charged.